A common question that gets asked of Mormons and the Mormon Church, more formally known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is whether they are Christians. Now, this may seem like a simple question to answer, especially for Mormons. However, there do seem to be some complicating factors, especially when talking to other Christians. Welcome, friends, enemies, and everyone in between, to my channel, The Masked Mormon. I am in fact the Masked Mormon.
Why are you wearing a mask? Were you burned by acid or something like that?
Oh no, it's just they're terribly comfortable. I think everyone will be wearing them in the future.
I'm a Mormon who used to believe in the truth claims of the Mormon Church. I was truly a hardcore believer. Then, after a pretty intense faith crisis, I realized that the church wasn't what it claimed to be. Now, I talk about the implications of Mormon doctrine, history, and some of my own personal experiences on the internet with you fine viewers. So let's get into it. The question of whether Mormons are Christian was one that really always frustrated me when I was a believer. Jesus' name was right in the name of the church, after all. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It should be that cut and dried, right? But we seem to run into a language problem. You see, the different religions speak different languages. Though they may all use the same words, those words often have different meanings for different faith groups. This can make it difficult to communicate between the different religions, even the different Christianities. Different churches will have different meanings for terms like resurrection, baptism, grace, works, God, atonement, and salvation. Not to mention the specialized words that have developed over the centuries in Catholic and Protestant theology. The member of one church will ask the member of another what they believe about salvation or the nature of the Bible or something similar, and they'll end up talking past each other because each of those words or concepts will have a different meaning for each person. For instance, story time. I served my mission around Cincinnati, Ohio. One summer evening, my companion and I were walking back to our apartment. We passed two men who were talking in their driveway, and they beckoned us over. Someone wanting to talk to us? That never happened. We were excited. As we started talking to them, the reality of the situation quickly dawned on us. They were evangelical preachers. They saw two Mormon missionaries and figured they might be able to show us the error of our Mormon ways. The conversation very quickly turned to the concept of faith versus works. There are some Christian sects that believe that trusting in the power of Jesus and inviting him into your heart saves a person from hellfire. Now, this is done by having some sort of born-again experience and saying a prayer that invites Jesus into your heart. Now, I know I'm likely oversimplifying this a bit, so if there's more details that I'm missing, let me know down in the comments. But that was my understanding from the preachers I talked to and the tracts that they would leave with us. All the other lifestyle changes like baptism and whatnot were just signs of this born-again experience. But those things did not bring salvation in themselves. They would accuse Mormons of trying to work our way into heaven. Requiring baptism, temple ordinances, and living the commandments of Mormonism was a works-based religion, which really isn't an incorrect assessment. I grew up in an era where saved by grace sorts of theologies were looked down on as not being able to cause the changes that would lead someone to exaltation in the celestial kingdom. Now, I know in recent years, Mormon teachings have been adopting more of the language of saved by grace, but in the 90s and early 2000s, the view portrayed by James chapter 2, or faith without works is dead, was the dominant view. If you couple that with 2 Nephi 25:23, which states, quote, "For we labor diligently to write, to persuade our children and also our brethren to believe in Christ, and to be reconciled to God, for we know that it is by grace that we are saved after all we can do," end quote. Which was interpreted as grace being something that makes up the difference from all of our other efforts. We are saved after all that we can do. Now, a more modern interpretation has been reframing this as we are saved despite all we can do, which is more fitting with mainstream Christianity. But decades of teaching emphasized the former instead of the latter interpretation. Those preachers also accused us of believing in a different Jesus than real Christians, which was something that I heard a lot, and it frustrated me. Like, how many Jesuses were there running around at the time? You believe in Jesus H. Christ, but I believe in Jesus F. Christ? A few months prior, I found a book in my apartment that had a string of questions to ask someone that was going down this line of questioning. And I found it to be the perfect time to put it into practice. Now back to the story. So I asked these preachers, what's required to be saved? All you have to do is invite Jesus into your heart and believe. Well, that sounds simple enough. Are there any other things that I would have to do? No. I don't have to be baptized or anything? No, you just have to believe and invite Jesus into your heart. You can be baptized as a sign of being saved, but that doesn't save you. So do I have to believe in any of the physical characteristics of Jesus or in any special traits of Jesus? No. Or do I have to know how salvation works or any of the mechanics of being saved? No. Like I said, you just have to invite him into your heart. And then once you're saved, you're always saved? You can't lose your salvation? No. Once you're saved, you're always saved. Well, I have good news for you then. Me, my companion here, and other Mormons, we're all saved. No, you believe you are saved by works. In order to join the Mormon Church, every member has to confess a belief in Jesus Christ and his divinity and his power to save us. But you believe in a different Jesus than we do. But you said it wasn't required to believe in any of the specific traits of Jesus. I'm actually pleased to inform you that, by your definition, we're saved. Your main issue seems to be that we're just working too hard. Now, that last statement flummoxed these preachers. At first, they thought that they had us, but this line of questioning ended up derailing whatever takedown they thought that they had for us. And I have to admit, this was one of the most satisfying experiences of my mission. We didn't pull out competing scriptural references or argued back and forth points of doctrine. It was just asking a few questions and using their own definitions to our own advantage. We ended up leaving on pretty good terms, but upon reflection, what I realized is that we were speaking different languages. Salvation, works, Jesus, and grace all had different meanings to each of us. And that's what it really comes down to when Mormons and other Christians talk to each other, especially when trying to decide what a Christian is. Are Mormons Christian? Well, it depends on what the definition of a Christian is. You have all sorts of Christians: Trinitarian, non-Trinitarian, creedal, non-creedal, saved by grace, not saved by grace, and all sorts of other distinguishing factors. It seems to end up being a no true Scotsman competition between the various Christian sects. They will try to use their own definitions of what is or isn't a Christian to include or exclude the religions they agree or disagree with. The tension seems to have existed throughout the history of Christianity. In the first century, there were several Christian groups vying for dominance. These included the Jewish Christians, the Pauline Christians, and the Gnostics, with some of these groups fading and others rising to prominence until the development of what we would recognize as the Roman Catholic Church. And this was the only game in town until the Great Schism in 1054, when the Eastern Orthodox Church broke away. This configuration remained pretty stable until the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, when other forms of Christianity started to break off. They had their own emphasis on doctrine, authority, and scripture, and for some of them, who was a real Christian? There are creedal Christians that use the various statements of belief, or creeds, to define themselves. Anyone who affirms these creeds is considered a Christian. There are the Trinitarian Christians who define the nature of God in terms of the Trinity, and anyone who accepts this is a Christian. There are sects that are considered creedal Trinitarians, like the Catholics and several Protestant denominations. Some are Trinitarian, like the Calvinists, Baptists, most Pentecostals, and Charismatic churches. Some are neither, like Mormonism and the Jehovah's Witnesses. Often, Trinitarian Christians, or their various denominations, will reject the Christian claims of non-Trinitarians. However, this can include 400 plus million people, or roughly 17% of all people who call themselves Christian. But that is the particular gate that they have chosen to keep, because they will think that they have the strongest doctrinal position. But it should be noted that Christianity isn't a protected term like champagne is. Christian seems to be whatever the group wants it to be. How is salvation attained? Who is God? What does faith mean? It seems to vary from denomination to denomination, and even from person to person. Some may fully accept a saved by grace sort of theology, but another person in that same congregation may live in fear that their faith-based salvation is in jeopardy and struggle not to lose their salvation. Their own definition of Christian is usually good enough for them. They will make whatever allowances as necessary and still consider themselves part of the team. Now, this can include any number of terrible acts against their fellow man. This can include the racism that was scripturally justified during the slave era and Jim Crow era of the United States, the burning of witches or heretics or non-believers that happened over the centuries, the current exclusion of LGBT people, and so much more. The definition of what a Christian is has always seemed to be kind of a fuzzy thing. It's always seemed to be in a state of flux. Today, there seems to be a political dimension that is being added into what a Christian is, at least in some parts of the United States. People always tend to create God, and even Jesus, in their own image. Now, I know he is a controversial figure, but I once read the book Battlefield Earth by L. Ron Hubbard. It's a very large and meandering book, but it was entertaining enough. In it, the story's protagonist ends up saving the Earth from the aliens that invaded and subjugated the planet, only for the planet to then be fought over by other alien factions. The hero of the story then ends up coming to an accord with these civilizations, and he ends up as a religious figure of sorts. His face even ends up on the money of these civilizations, only his features end up being transformed to make him look more like the aliens of these civilizations. He is remade in the image of whomever needs it, such as it is for the various religions. The God and Jesus of these religions have the same priorities as their particular denominations. Who ends up in heaven and hell seems to be as varied as the denomination. Just rest assured that the select group is always in the in group. Though some groups of Christians are more ecumenical, and their view of who is in the in group can be more expansive. So it depends on who you're talking to and what definition they are using, whether Mormons are Christian or not. The Mormon Church does seem to be trying to be more accepted by mainstream Christianity. The church has adopted a new symbol. The Christus statue, carved by Dutch sculptor Bertel Thorvaldsen in 1833, has been replacing the angel Moroni as the symbol of Mormonism. The church has been trying to leave behind the Mormon moniker and emphasize its full name, with the idea that it will help people focus on Jesus more, or that outsiders will see Jesus Christ in the name and forget all of the Mormon stuff. But at the same time, the church has been diffusing what has always made it unique among the other Christianities. And if the church thinks that this will make them more palatable to mainstream Christianity, I think they will be sorely disappointed. Whether they emphasize it or not, the more esoteric doctrines and beliefs will always be associated with Mormonism. Even more than a century on, the first thing associated with the church is usually polygamy. Evangelicals will never accept Mormons as real Christians. But where does that leave us? I think it depends on who you're talking to. Some will say yes, some will say no. But I think it depends on what their specific definition of Christian is. And I think that illuminates their own values and what they find to be important. So are Mormons Christian? My stance is that if someone wants to call themselves a Christian, then they are. Instead of complicating things with various doctrinal or creedal positions, if they believe in Jesus, whatever form that may take, then, by my definition, they're a Christian. But what are your thoughts? Are Mormons Christian? Why or why not? Let me know down in the comments. And if you like what I do, please press the like button and subscribe. It really helps my channel to grow. And I'll see you in the next video.